The rain hammered against the marble steps of Fulton County Courthouse as Maya clutched her worn leather handbag against her chest. 6 weeks had passed since that nightmare evening, yet the memory burned as fresh as the shame that had nearly consumed her. She could still feel the cold metal of the leash around her neck, still hear the cruel laughter echoing in her ears as they dragged her across the wet pavement like some broken animal. But today was different. Today, she walked through those courthouse doors not as a victim, but as a woman armed with the most dangerous weapon of all, the truth. It had started so innocently that rainy evening when she arrived at the sprawling estate to clean the kitchen of retired Police Chief Harrison. The house reeked of old money and older corruption, its walls lined with commendations and photographs of the chief shaking hands with politicians. His wife, Judge Margaret Harrison, sat regally in her leather chair, her judicial robes draped nearby like a crown waiting to be worn. Their nephew Tyler, a spoiled 20-something with dead eyes and a trust fund, had been drinking since noon. When Maya accidentally knocked over his glass while wiping the counter, his rage exploded like a dam bursting. "You worthless piece of trash!" Tyler screamed, his face twisted with an entitled fury that came from never hearing the word no. Within minutes, Judge Harrison and 2 off-duty officers materialized as if summoned by some dark magic. Their smiles were razor-sharp, their accusations swift and merciless. They claimed she had stolen jewelry from the bedroom, though Maya had never left the kitchen. When she tried to protest to defend herself with the dignity that was her birthright, Tyler's eyes gleamed with sadistic pleasure. "Prove your innocence," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Crawl across this floor like the dog you are. T." His leash came from somewhere. Perhaps they kept it ready for moments like this. The officer's laughter was the soundtrack to her humiliation as they clipped it around her neck and dragged her into the rain. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, cameras flashed, and Maya felt something inside her die as she was paraded through the mud like a broken thing. But even as tears mixed with rainwater on her face, even as their laughter cut deeper than any blade, a small flame of fury began to burn in her chest. The courthouse buzzed with whispered conversations as Maya walked to the defense table that morning. She had dismissed every lawyer who approached her, not because they were incompetent, but because she knew they would never risk their careers against Judge Harrison's iron grip on the legal system. Instead, she had spent 6 weeks becoming something more dangerous than any attorney, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Her folder bulged with documents, photographs, and most importantly, a small black flash drive that would soon turn their world to ash. The prosecution painted their careful picture of Maya as a violent thief, their voices smooth with practiced deception. But Maya waited, patient as a predator, watching the judge's confident smirk and the officers' relaxed postures. They thought they had already won. They had no idea they were sitting in their own courtroom, digging their own graves with every lie they told. When Maya finally stood to present her case, the first photograph she raised silenced the room like a gunshot. There she was, on her knees in the mud, the leash stark against her neck, rain streaming down her face while they stood around her laughing. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Maya's voice rang clear and strong. "This is what justice looks like in their world." Judge Harrison's gavel cracked like thunder as she screamed for the photo to be disregarded. But Maya was ready. 3 more photographs from different angles, time-stamped and verified, painted the complete picture of their cruelty. The gasps from the jury box were audible now, and even the court reporter had stopped typing to stare in horror at the evidence of such casual brutality. But the photographs were just the appetizer. Maya inserted the flash drive into the court's system, and suddenly the room filled with the cold, calculating voices of Judge Harrison and Police Chief Harrison discussing how to make the cleaning woman disappear and ensure she never works in this city again. The conspiracy was laid bare in their own words, their arrogance so complete they had never imagined their private conversations being recorded. The prosecution objected frantically, but the damage was spreading like poison through their carefully constructed facade. Maya's next revelation struck like lightning. Document after document proved that Police Chief Harrison had systematically embezzled millions from city disaster relief funds, money meant to rebuild communities destroyed by storms. Instead, the cash had flowed into Tyler Development Corporation, a company that existed solely to launder stolen taxpayer money into luxury apartments and commercial properties. The empire they had built on the backs of the powerless was worth over $300 million, every brick mortared with corruption, and every dollar stolen from those who needed it most. The courtroom had become a pressure cooker ready to explode when Maya called her witnesses. Clara, the former maid, testified through tears about her own forced confession years earlier. The contractor revealed how he had been paid to falsify invoices and inflate costs to hide the embezzlement. Each testimony was a nail in their collective coffin, each revelation another crack in the foundation of their power. The judge's hands trembled as she gripped her gavel, her once commanding presence reduced to that of a cornered animal. Then Maya dropped her final bomb. She announced that the court clerk who had provided the recordings had been threatened at gunpoint by Officer Bradley, one of the men who had participated in her humiliation. The audio recording that followed was chilling in its naked brutality. Bradley's voice, cold and threatening, promising that the clerk would disappear forever if she didn't keep quiet. The jury foreman visibly recoiled, and several jurors looked sick to their stomachs. The courtroom security doubled, but everyone could feel that something massive was about to break wide open. Judge Harrison made one last desperate attempt to maintain control, ruling that Maya's evidence was inadmissible due to chain of custody violations. But as she raised her gavel for what she thought would be the killing blow, the courtroom doors swung open with the weight of federal authority. Commander David Carter of the Navy Judge Advocate General's Corps strode into the room like an avenging angel, his uniform crisp, his presence commanding absolute attention. Behind him, federal agents moved with the precision of a military operation, and Maya felt her heart leap as she realized her letters to federal authorities had not been ignored. Your Honor, Commander Carter's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. By direct order of the Federal District Court, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and abuse of power under color of law. The courthouse erupted into pandemonium as agents moved swiftly to arrest not just the judge, but the officers, and even Tyler, who had been sitting confidently in the gallery. For the first time since this nightmare began, Maya saw genuine fear in their eyes as handcuffs clicked around their wrists and their rights were read aloud for all to hear. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Within hours, news crews surrounded the courthouse as the story exploded across national headlines. The sealed federal investigation that had been quietly building for months had used Maya's evidence as the final catalyst to bring down an entire network of corruption. Bank accounts were frozen, property seized, and the $300 million empire built on stolen taxpayer money crumbled overnight like a house of cards in a hurricane. Maya stood on the courthouse steps that evening, watching as police cars carried away the people who had tried to destroy her. The community rallied around her story. Civil rights groups demanded broader investigations, and the federal government announced a complete review of the county's judicial system. Judge Harrison would soon face her own trial in the same courtroom where she had once dispensed corrupted justice, and the officers who had laughed at Maya's humiliation would spend years behind bars contemplating their choices. Months later, Maya walked past that courthouse on a bright morning, her head held high and her steps steady with the confidence of someone who had stared into the abyss and emerged victorious. When a reporter stopped her and asked what message she had for others facing injustice, she paused and looked back at the building that had once been her torment and was now her triumph. They can only take your dignity if you let them, she said simply, her voice carrying the quiet strength of someone who had turned her deepest pain into the most powerful weapon of all. Then she walked away, finally free to live a life that was truly her own,